When my stepfather, Rob Sterling, shoved me out of my chair at Christmas dinner, I realized everything I thought I knew about family was a lie. That night, the warmth of the holiday was shattered by silence. An unbearable, suffocating silence, as everyone around the table simply watched. No one moved. No one spoke. Except Rob. He just sat there with that cold, smug look, like he had the whole world under his thumb. And somehow, I was supposed to pretend it never happened. I remember the scrape of my chair as I fell sideways onto the polished floor, the sound sharp and humiliating in the spacious dining room. The scent of roasted turkey and pine filled the air, but all I could smell was the bitter sting of betrayal. That moment didn't just break me, it cracked open a door to secrets I wasn't ready to face. Before that Christmas, life felt normal. At least, as normal as it could be with Rob Sterling in the picture. My name is Cassie Vance. After my father died 3 years ago, my mother remarried Rob. At first, he seemed like the answer to our prayers, a steady man, charming in his own way, with a smile that promised stability. But beneath that polished exterior, something was off. I just didn't know how deep the rot ran. Our home, a modest but comfortable house in the suburbs, smelled like cinnamon candles and fresh laundry on most days. The kitchen was always warm with the hum of the oven or the clatter of pans. Mom's laugh had come back in small bursts, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we were finally healing. Rob's daughter, Bianca, from his previous marriage, was visiting that Christmas. She was younger than me by a few years, bright and a little too perfect, always impeccably dressed, hair flawless, and with that practiced smile that made you wonder if it ever reached her eyes. The family dynamic was complicated, but manageable, or so I believed. Christmas Eve had passed with the usual mix of forced cheer and awkward conversations. I helped Mom hang ornaments on the tree, careful to place the fragile glass ones where Rob's clumsy hands wouldn't reach. Bianca hovered nearby, scrolling on her phone, barely making eye contact. That night, I dreamed of my father. He was there, smiling, holding out a hand, but when I reached for it, he vanished into the shadows. On Christmas Day, the house buzzed with energy. Mom was in the kitchen, humming as she basted the turkey. The scent of rosemary and garlic drifted through the rooms. I set the table, placing the polished silverware with care, listening to the soft crackle of the fireplace. Rob arrived first, dressed sharply, his presence commanding but cold. Bianca followed, carrying a carefully wrapped gift. They exchanged a few words with Mom, their smiles too tight, too rehearsed. We sat around the large oak dining table, the kind my father had insisted we get. The kind that felt like home. That's when it happened. Rob looked at the chair beside me, then at Bianca. Without warning, he reached over and physically pushed me out of my seat. The force was enough to make me stumble sideways. I looked up, stunned. The room froze. Mom's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Bianca's expression was unreadable. The rest of the family just stared, caught between disbelief and silence. Rob slid into the empty chair as if I had vanished. The feast went on around me, but I was trapped in that moment, humiliated and invisible. Later, I sat in my room, hands trembling, heart pounding. How could he do that? What had I done to deserve this? I replayed the scene over and over, the cold shock settling into a slow-burning anger. That night, as snow quietly fell outside, I found myself staring at my late father's old laptop, something I'd never dared to open. The password was scribbled in faded ink on a note tucked inside the keyboard cover. Curiosity pulled me in. What secrets had he left behind? What I discovered wasn't just surprising, it was devastating. Files filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, emails, evidence of money being siphoned from my father's company. Large sums disappearing, assets vanishing into accounts I didn't recognize. And there, among the files, were names. Names of women, widows scattered across the country. Women who had lost husbands under mysterious circumstances, all connected by one thread. Rob Sterling. I reached out to one of the women, a widow named Karen from Ohio. Her voice was shaky when she answered my call, full of pain and fear. He took everything, she said, and left me with nothing but debt and broken promises. Karen wasn't alone. Over the following weeks, I pieced together a network of victims. Women like me, blindsided by the man they trusted or thought they trusted. The truth hit me like a freight train. Rob wasn't just a cruel stepfather. He was a con man, a thief hiding behind a mask of respectability. And my father had known. Then came the call from Agent Maya Rodriguez, an FBI agent who had been quietly investigating Rob's criminal ring for years. "Your father was working with us," Maya said. "He tried to protect you and your mother, but Rob was always one step ahead." With Maya's help, I gathered the evidence, emails, recordings, financial records, and prepared to expose Rob for the fraud he was. It wasn't easy. The betrayal cut deep. Rob fought back with a countersuit and a slick PR campaign, trying to paint me as the villain. But justice has a way of revealing itself. Rob's own lawyer's paralegal, Diane, turned over incriminating recordings, conversations where Rob boasted about his schemes and lied to the very people paying his fees. The trial was brutal. Rob was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The man who pushed me from my chair that Christmas was finally behind bars. Now, I stand at the helm of my father's company, working to rebuild what was lost. Mom is healing. Slowly but surely, the shadows lifting from her eyes. And I've started a foundation to help other victims women who, like me, were betrayed by the people they trusted most. What began as a moment of public cruelty became a lasting victory for justice. After that Christmas dinner, everything changed. Not just in the house, but inside me. I carried the weight of that shove, not just the physical jolt, but the emotional upheaval. It wasn't just Rob pushing me out of the chair. It was the truth forcing its way into my life, uninvited and relentless. For weeks after, I tried to act normal, to keep the fragile peace. Mom was quieter than before, her smiles less frequent, her hands trembling when she brewed her morning coffee. Bianca stayed mostly in her room or out with friends, her presence a silent reminder of the wedge growing between us all. Rob? He wore that same smug expression, as if nothing had happened. But behind closed doors, his phone calls grew longer, his eyes sharper. I knew he was watching me, waiting for a misstep. Every night, I'd sit by the window in my room, the cold December air seeping through the cracks, and scroll through the files on that old laptop. The evidence was overwhelming, transaction after transaction, showing how my father's company was being drained. It felt like watching a slow-motion theft of everything my family had built. I was angry, but also scared. Rob was dangerous. I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. One evening, I finally called Agent Maya Rodriguez. Her voice was calm, but firm over the phone, a rare steadiness in the chaos I was living. Cassie, your father wanted to stop Rob, but he was smart. We've been tracking the network for years. What you found could bring him down. Hearing that, a flicker of hope lit inside me. I wasn't alone. Maya helped me organize the evidence, emails, bank transfers, recordings. She coached me on how to speak with the other victims, how to build a case. I reached out to Karen again and met her in a quiet cafe near her home. Karen was a small woman, with tired eyes and a cautious smile. He promised he'd help, she said softly, stirring her coffee. But all he wanted was my money. Over the next few weeks, I spoke with more widows and families, each story, a thread in a vast web of deceit. They had all been victims of Rob's charm and lies, their lives unraveling as their husbands' legacies vanished. Back home, I confronted Rob. It was the kind of conversation I had rehearsed 1,000 times in my mind. But the real thing was different. One afternoon, I found him in his study, papers spread across his desk. He looked up, surprised to see me. Cassie, he said smoothly. What are you doing here? I know what you've done, I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside. I have proof. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw the real man behind the mask, a man who'd lost control. You don't understand, he hissed. Your father made his choices. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Cleaning up? I echoed, disgusted. You stole from him. From us. From every widow you could find. He laughed then, cold and bitter. This is business, Cassie. Nothing personal. That was the moment I stopped seeing him as family and started seeing him as the enemy. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Rob launched a countersuit, claiming I was defaming him, trying to ruin his reputation. His PR team spun stories about a greedy stepdaughter trying to take control of a fortune. But then, a breakthrough. Diane, the paralegal working for Rob's lawyer, contacted Maya. She had recordings, hours of conversations where Rob admitted to the fraud, mocked his victims, even planned to silence anyone who threatened him. Those tapes turned the tide. At the trial, the courtroom was thick with tension. Rob sat there, once confident, now visibly shaken as the evidence piled up. When the judge sentenced him to 25 years, a hush fell over the room. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Justice was served, but the wounds ran deep. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. The company was a shadow of what it once was, but with Maya's support and the help of a dedicated team, we began to restore it. Mom, too, found strength. Her laughter returned, softer but genuine, and the house felt alive again. I also launched a foundation to help victims of financial abuse, women who'd been left shattered by people they trusted. Their stories fueled my mission, turning my pain into purpose. Every time I speak at an event or meet a survivor, I feel my father's presence, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can grow. The day I decided to push back was the day I stopped being afraid. After the shove at Christmas dinner, I spent a long night in my room, replaying that moment over and over, how the polished floor scraped my skin, how every eye in the room was locked on me, frozen. The silence was worse than any words could have been. It wasn't just humiliation, it was the cold realization that the people who should have protected me were choosing to look away. But I knew then that if I stayed silent, Rob would keep stealing everything my father and mother had fought so hard for. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the scent of burnt toast still hanging in the air. Mom moved around the room quietly, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to reach out, to ask if she felt the same pain, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I focused on the laptop again. The password was fragile, almost like a whispered secret left behind by my father. As I typed it in, the screen flickered to life, revealing a world I wasn't prepared for. There were emails, hundreds of them from Rob to a network of people I'd never met. Money transfers disguised as business expenses. Properties sold without consent. Investments drained. It was meticulous. Calculated theft hidden behind layers of fake documents and forged signatures. One file caught my eye, a spreadsheet titled Widows. I opened it, heart pounding, to find names, phone numbers, and notes beside each one. Karen, Ohio contacted. Linda pending. Samantha warning sent. I swallowed hard. These were not just numbers. They were people, real women, hurt and betrayed. Reaching out to Karen was the first step. I remember sitting in a small cafe, the smell of coffee and pastries filling the space as she told me her story. He was charming, she said softly, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. He promised to help me manage my late husband's estate, but instead, he took everything, left me with nothing. Her voice cracked, and I felt tears prick my eyes. I'm so sorry, I whispered, wishing I could undo the damage. Over the next few weeks, I connected with more women, each story a painful echo of the last. We formed a fragile sisterhood, united by our shared loss and a fierce desire for justice. Agent Maya Rodriguez was a beacon in the storm. When she first called, her voice was steady, authoritative. Your father tried to bring Rob down, she said. He was gathering evidence, but Rob was always one step ahead. With Maya's help, I learned how to navigate the legal maze ahead. She taught me how to protect the evidence, how to speak with the media, how to stay safe. The burden was heavy, but knowing I wasn't alone made it bearable. Confronting Rob was harder than I imagined. I found him in his study, surrounded by the trophies of his deceit papers, framed photos, a glass of scotch untouched on his desk. He looked up as I entered, surprise flickering across his face before it hardened into disdain. I know what you're doing, I said, voice trembling but firm. You've stolen from us, from my family. I have proof. He sneered. Proof? You're just a child playing detective. I held up the laptop. My father trusted me with this. And with the FBI's help, I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done. His eyes darkened. You don't understand. This is business. No, I said quietly. This is betrayal. Rob fought back hard. He filed a countersuit, accusing me of defamation and greed. His PR team painted me as a bitter stepdaughter trying to seize control of a fortune that wasn't mine. But the cracks in his armor grew when Diane, his lawyer's paralegal, stepped forward. She handed over recordings, hours of Rob boasting about his schemes, mocking his victims, even plotting to silence those who threatened him. The courtroom was tense, every word heavy with the weight of truth. When the judge sentenced Rob to 25 years, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Justice was served, but the scars remained. In the aftermath, rebuilding was a slow, painful process. The company was in disarray, but with Maya's support and the help of loyal staff, we began to restore it. Mom's healing was fragile but steady. The house, once filled with tension, slowly regained warmth. I founded a charity to help other victims of financial abuse, a way to turn my pain into purpose. Every survivor story I hear reminds me that even in the darkest moments, strength can rise. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Reporters lined the walls, their cameras blinking like fireflies in the dim light. The weight of every eye in that room felt like a physical thing pressing down on my chest. I sat with my mother, who held my hand tightly, her knuckles white. Rob Sterling sat across from us, his posture arrogant, as if the law was just another game he was sure he would win. But today, something was different. The truth was no longer a shadow. It was in the spotlight. The trial unfolded slowly, like a storm gathering force. Day by day, the evidence we had gathered was laid bare: emails, bank transfers, the testimony of the widows I had met. Each piece chipped away at Rob's carefully constructed lies. Diane's recordings were the turning point. Her voice was steady as she took the stand, playing the tapes that revealed Rob's true nature, the man who talked about people as if they were nothing more than dollar signs. When the judge finally delivered the sentence 25 years, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Justice, yes, but the cost was a family shattered, trust broken beyond repair. After the trial, I returned to the empty office where my father once worked. The silence was thick with memories. I sat at his desk, fingers tracing the worn wood, feeling his presence in the quiet. This company was more than a business. It was his legacy. And now, it was my responsibility. With Maya's continued support, I worked to rebuild the company's reputation. We brought in honest advisors, transparent policies, and a commitment to integrity. Slowly, the pieces started to come together. At home, Mom's healing was fragile but real. She smiled more often, her eyes less haunted. We found solace in small things, a shared meal, a walk in the park, quiet evenings by the fire. One of the most important steps was founding the foundation, a place to help victims like Karen, Linda, and the many others who had lost everything to Rob's schemes. Our mission was clear: to provide support, legal assistance, and a voice for those who had been silenced. At the first event, I stood before a crowd of survivors, their faces marked by pain but also hope. Sharing my story wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Together, we were reclaiming power, turning our pain into strength. Looking back, I see how that cruel Christmas shove was a moment of awakening. It forced me to see the truth behind the smiles and the facades. It revealed the fractures in the family and the lies that had been hidden for so long. But it also showed me my own strength, the ability to fight back, to seek justice, and to heal. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal can break you, but it can also build you. Healing wasn't linear. Some days felt like progress, others like falling back into the dark. The house where I grew up still held echoes of laughter and love. But now it also carried shadows, reminders of trust broken, and innocence lost. Mom and I talked more than ever. Our conversations slow and careful, filled with unspoken fears and fragile hopes. She never blamed me for standing up to Rob. In fact, I think she was relieved someone finally did. But there was sadness too, the grief of a life derailed, dreams stolen. I found comfort in small routines, mornings spent organizing paperwork at the company, evenings walking through the neighborhood with a cup of tea, the smell of damp earth and pine in the air. These quiet moments grounded me. The foundation's work became my anchor. Every case we took on was a reminder that I wasn't alone, and neither were the women and families who'd been hurt by people like Rob. One afternoon, I met Linda, a woman from Texas who had lost her home and savings. Her voice was steady as she shared her story, but tears welled in her eyes when she spoke of betrayal. "I don't know how to trust again," she said softly. I reached out, squeezing her hand. "You're not alone. We'll fight for you." These connections gave me purpose beyond the courtroom or the boardroom. They reminded me that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing. Rob's 25-year sentence was a victory, but it was only one chapter. The real work was rebuilding lives and restoring faith in what's right. I often think about my father, about what he would say if he could see how far we've come. I believe he would be proud, not just of the company, but of the woman I've become. There's a lesson in all of this. Sometimes, the people closest to us can cause the deepest wounds. But those wounds don't have to define us. We can choose to rise, to fight back with courage and grace. Because in the end, justice isn't just about punishment, it's about reclaiming your story. Thank you for listening to my story. I never imagined that a single moment being pushed from my chair on Christmas would unravel so much. It was a moment of public cruelty. Yes, but also the spark that ignited a journey toward truth, justice, and healing. Sometimes, the people we trust most can hurt us in ways we never expect. And sometimes, the silence of those around us can feel heavier than the pain itself. But I want to ask you this. When faced with betrayal or injustice, what would you do? Would you find the strength to stand up, even when the odds feel overwhelming? Or would you stay silent, hoping the storm passes? There's no easy answer, but I hope my story reminds you that speaking up matters, seeking truth matters, and above all, healing matters. If you or someone you know is facing betrayal, whether in family, work, or life, remember that you are not alone. There is strength in community, and there is hope in action. If this story touched you, or if you have a story of your own to share, please leave a comment. Your voice matters. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of resilience, heartbreak, and redemption, please subscribe and support this channel. Together, we can create a space where truth is heard, justice is sought, and healing begins. Would you have done what I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time. Take care of yourself and each other.